Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to GTACC webinar today on mental health and well-being and having those difficult conversations to remove the stigma around mental health. And so this all originated because at the conference that we had in September, we had an amazing mental health session, and three of the speakers are the same. Our moderator is the same, and we have Adam Coletta, Melissa Hurley, who spoke and they shared their journey. And one of the attendees was Diana Tonis, and she came up with this idea that, you know what, can we have a session around those conversations to support people when they are going through crisis, whether it be physical, mental, and usually it's a combination of both. And so it is with that intention that we're here just human to human to serve. Each of these people are coming with their hearts just wide open. And if, it's a difficult time of year approaching. And so it is with all of our intentions that today, if one of you walks away feeling better and empowered, then mission accomplished. So today you'll be in the great hands of the moderator, Jeff Doran from CCEOC, and we have a fantastic panelists, and they'll introduce themselves: Adam Coletta, Melissa Hurley, and Diana Tonis. And so I'm gonna I'll zip it now. I'm here to welcome you, and let me turn it over to Jeff Doran.
Well, thank you very much, Sangeeta, and I'm just very honored to have been asked to moderate this special webinar, and looking forward to what conversation comes out of this. And as we said at the GTACC conference, we want to keep the conversation going, and so this is our effort to do that. And so I also want to thank the panel members for donating their time to this effort. They've all gone through some pretty challenging situations themselves, which you're going to learn a bit more about today. But they've also come out of these situations stronger, and I think that's the hopeful message that you'll come away with today. But also some practical things that you can take back into your own personal and work lives to hopefully make a difference with the people that are around you. So that's what the session is about. And without any further ado, I'd just like to get right into it and pose the first question to our panelists. And it really is, I want people who are on the webinar today to understand some of your background. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about your life experience, what's taking you to where you are today, and to give some people an understanding of where you were and where you are. So let's start off with Melissa. I'm going to pick on you first. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and what has transpired with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I think this is such an important topic, and I'm very honored to be a part of it and to share my story with such great people on the panel. And of course, both Sangeeta and Jeff, who I've gotten to know over the course of the past few years. So to go back and tell you a little bit about my story, well, really my mental health journey started in 2018. And well, I will say 2017, when I had quite a traumatic birth experience with my second child. After having a children, in certain cases, you might have some postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety that you chalk up to being a parent. Well, mine really hit hard in August of 2018 when I got struck with a pretty massive trigger that led to almost blacking out of reality. And that's really where I started the journey of realizing that my mental health wasn't where it needed to be or where I want it to be for the future. And I wasn't going to be able to sustain living in that type of lifestyle for me and for my family. So what I did was I really advocated for myself, pushed forward through GPs, through social workers, through going back to my OB, and really trying to find where I fit within that journey, because I was ending my postpartum, but I knew I needed help. So really making sure that I knew where I fit in that journey and advocating for myself was so critically important. And I found that way through Ontario Shores, actually, where Here in Ontario, there's a couple of different locations that you can go to, and Ontario Shores was one of them for me. That gave me my official diagnosis of severe post-traumatic stress disorder. With that diagnosis, that allowed me to open up some doors to now I know what's happening with my mental health. It allowed me to open the doors to getting the right support that I needed. I had spent 18 months going through EMDR and exposure therapy, which is quite intense therapy, but well worthwhile. And then after those 18 months, I felt like I was ready to return back to the workplace and get back out into the social setting. And during that time, going back to my old workplace was a little bit nerve-wracking for me. And why it was nerve-wracking was because I've changed as a person. I left quite abruptly, and then going back to a place where they knew me for 15 years, they knew who I was and how I was, and going back and explaining that I'm a little bit more reserved, quiet, and private in comparison to being very outgoing, which I've come back to being that person, absolutely. But in that moment of time, I just wasn't there yet, but I was ready to get back into that scene. So for me, I made a big decision, which was to change my career. And I changed my career with the full mission of not sharing with anybody what had happened with me. I wanted a fresh start. I wanted it to be my own private story. And then insert the pandemic. And that was a really tough time. So I started in my new job here at Bill Gosling, outsourcing in January of 2020, and then the pandemic hit, which brought a whole new light into mental health and the focus on it, but also concerns that others were feeling in isolation. So moving away from that, I was like, oh, wow, Sangeeta reached out and asked if I wanted to be part of Women in Leadership. And I made the decision that it was time. It was the right time for me to share my story. It was the right time for me to give a little bit of hope to folks that I had gone through something that I felt set back, and this is just a moment in time. So thank you, Sangeeta, for giving me that opportunity, because it's gotten me to where I'm at today. And today I'm in a place where I am advocating for mental health, and I am talking about my story openly. I am learning through the process the importance of psychological safety, both what I need in the workplace, but also what I need to give my team as well. And that's so incredibly important, because without that feeling of trust and safety, and removing the fear of judgment, we're not able to flourish. We're not able to be ourselves. We're not able to really hit that peak of who we are. So that's a little bit about me and my journey. So I'm excited. Thank you, Jeff, again, for picking on me first. I always appreciate that.
I don't know. I always seem to go to you, Melissa, and you do such a great job. So thank you so much. The one thing I didn't get you to do was to say, we know who you work for, Bill Gosling, but what is your role there?
I'm Vice President of Learning and People Development for Bill Gosling Outsourcing. Yeah.
Okay, so what a great position to be in to talk about the things that you know about and to help people from your position, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Very important to embed this, and we'll talk a little bit more with others' experience as well. It all starts with management training. It all starts with building that culture and making sure that resources are available, both for our frontline staff as well, but equally our managers too. So excited to share a little bit more about that as we get in.
Perfect. We're gonna love to get into that a little bit more detail in a few minutes. So let's go to our next person. I'm gonna pick on Adam next, and say Diana for the third one here. But Adam, could you just give us a little background and talk to us a little bit about your mental health journey?
Yeah. So I guess me and Mel shouldn't feel special because you're going to pick on all of us at some point, right?
Oh, you bet.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. Thank you for attending, and Sangeeta for hosting. My name is Adam Coletta, and I'm a senior manager at CIBC for contact center channel optimization. I was thinking about, what is particularly interesting about me, and I don't know if I have a whole lot, but I will say that despite my best efforts, there seems to be a wallet and a car key goblin in my house that likes to move my stuff for fun and watch me look for it frantically. And that's been happening for the better part of 10 years now. So if anyone has any ideas on how I can identify this goblin and get it under control, you let me know.
I hear you.
Yes. So in terms of my journey, it's been colorful to say the least medically. It began in my early 20s when I experienced cardiac issues that quickly escalated and required surgical intervention. No one expects to have open heart surgery as a young adult, though despite the severity of the issue and the invasiveness of the surgery, I pride myself on my resilience during that detour, where in retrospect, I emerged relatively unscathed, perhaps tuned up a tad with a mechanical heart valve and lifelong prescription of blood thinners. 5 years after, I began to have symptoms of internal bleeding that I speculated was linked to my blood thinning medication. After going to the hospital and cooperating with what seemed like a litany of tests, my life quickly derailed from that beaten path that I felt like I just recently resumed. I can vividly remember the young doctor that walked into the room with this sheepish disposition that, looking back, was really him having to deliver a message that was in conflict with my optimism. I call it scientific yet sinister, and that was the diagnosis of leukemia, which was exacerbated by the fact that days earlier, I was told that we were expecting our first child. My story is one of hope. It's one of transformation. It's a story of a paradigm shift that happened for me and the lens that I now see the world from, disengaged from autopilot. Melissa mentioned the pandemic, and that for me was an extension of a multi-year isolation that I was already engaged in. My return to the workplace revealed flaws in our culture that are often concealed by mass protocols and blanket procedures that are not conducive to supporting mental health and well-being. And as far as my story in this chapter, I have rebounded as an advocate for people in crisis, and I aim to be the leader that I wish I had during my most challenging times.
Absolutely incredible. And yeah, I think the word that resonates with me, Adam, is resilience. And I think that's a common thread that we're going to hear today with you folks, and hopefully the people who are on the webinar today. That's a real it's an internal thing to rely on, but to know that you have it, you may not know until you go through what you go through. So thank you for that in-depth view into your world, and I appreciate that. And I do not know where the goblins come from, but I know I have one in my house too. So we need to talk and maybe get an association put together to eradicate thieving goblins. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate that. Okay, Diana, you are next, and we would love to hear more about your story and what your mental health journey has been and how it's impacted you. Oh, and
Yeah.
also, if you have something interesting to tell us, maybe you have a goblin too. I don't know, but feel free.
I'm not sure I have a goblin, but I will. Yeah. So I'll start. I'm Diana Tonis. I'm senior manager at Toronto Hydro in the contact center and collections. I guess I was going to share that I've been to Disney over 20 times. Adam had shared something about doing braids, so I want. But my personal, I have a solitaire score of 905, which I'm very proud of. So maybe that's my interesting fact for today. So my personal journey is April 2nd, 2019. I was sent to a surgeon. I had been seeing my doctor for some concerns that I had on my breast. I had a biopsy. She took my hand, and I hadn't been even off the table at that point. She took my hand and she said, I'm 95% sure that you have inflammatory breast cancer stage 4. And I mean, shock is probably not even close to the word that there's no cancer in my family. I had been just completely blindsided. And I remember getting off the table, getting dressed and not really understanding what that meant. So I went home, my doctor Googled, which I should not have done because I'd never heard about inflammatory breast cancer, and found out it's a rare form of breast cancer. 8 to 10% of all people in North America are diagnosed with inflammatory breast cancer. It's not a lump. It gets in the skin and the milk glands, and it's a very, very aggressive cancer. So I went into kind of a ninja mode of, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to deal with this? Started to figure out what I was going to do for treatment. I hadn't even seen an oncologist at that point, but really was trying to work on figuring out what I was going to do. And I failed to mention, not being a very good Google person, what I read was most people with inflammatory breast cancer don't live beyond 2 years. So I had to figure out how I was going to see my daughter graduate from high school. So from there, a couple days later, I got my head into a place where I could even just go to my boss, who is Evelyn Page, who's part of our GTACC, and she was the most incredible person I could have ever asked for as a manager and director. I just shared my news as far as I knew. I didn't really didn't know what was going to happen, and she just really was so kind. And I won't be able to remember the exact words, but I just remembered a sense of relief. She said she had suggested maybe I speak with a couple of people that we have internally on some of the some health support or cancer support. And so it just was very, very reassuring. She took my lead on, what to communicate and what not to communicate. So I went to go see my oncologist the following Wednesday. Once I knew what the treatment plan was, and I checked in with her again, she said, I'll take care of all the communications for anybody that you don't want to communicate it to. And for whatever reason, that was just a huge relief for me. I don't know why, and I still don't know why, but I was embarrassed and I was ashamed that I had breast cancer and that I wasn't going to be at work. Again, I can't really explain that part of it, but it was just such a relief for her to just even take that. And she just kind of said, go and get healthy. So I spent about 8 months going through chemo and surgery, mastectomy and radiation. And then when I came back to work, and so all through my journey, she was always checking in, how was I doing? And when I was coming back to work, because I felt like I definitely was not the same person. I was not confident in my abilities. And she just almost literally held my hand and also just kind of said, we're going to figure this out together. You let me know what your transition, what you want to work on. Maybe we'll take what we the people manage. Like, she was just so flexible, so supportive, and I felt safe coming back. Mentally, I had to get my head around it, and it just was such. I felt like it's a safe place to land. So that was in the middle of the pandemic, and so I was able to work from home. Then I had a recurrence in 2021, almost exactly 2 years later. Similar, this time it was on the right side in my lymph nodes. And again, I just, her support was really just allowed me to get through it, not worrying about anything. And just those words of generosity and support and kindness were so meaningful. And again, I don't think I really remember the exact words she used, but just genuine and true and just really, really just powerful. So yeah, I want to say that her understanding and ability to support me through it really was, I think, the mental health journey, because I think anybody, as you mentioned, who's gone through anything difficult, it's that mental health journey is tough. The physical is tough, but I think the mental part of it is more difficult. And if you have one part of your life, you know, if it's your work life where it can be supported, it just really means a lot, and I think really helps you to get through your journey of difficulty.
Yeah, sounds like you had amazing support with your work, and we know Evelyn quite well, and she is an amazing person. So
She is.
what a great support you had in her, and the organization too. And you know, that's the thing that I'm hearing, I think, from all of you. I mean, there's the two sides of the situation. There's the personal side, and then there's work. I mean, we all work for a living, and depending on where you work and the work that you do will influence certainly how you're going to recover and how you're going to move forward. So amazing story, Diana, and thank you for sharing that. It's a very personal story to share with everyone, but I'm sure with all of you being here today, this helps you to talk about these stories and get it out there. And each time I hope that something new pops out, and that you discover something maybe a little bit different, and we'll find out more about that as we go along. Sangeeta, anything to share, or any comments?
No, but what I heard throughout is that need for people to have genuine empathy for one another, because we don't know what's going on below the surface. You know.
Yeah, I agree. Empathy is probably one of the biggest leadership focus areas that I'm seeing out there right now. And I don't know why it hasn't always been, but it certainly seems to be much more relevant and prominent in leadership training and understanding as we go forward. So that's great for everyone out there who maybe is not dealing with the significant impacts you folks have dealt with, but even just day-to-day things. But certainly we need leaders that are going to be able to put themselves in other people's shoes. Well, I would like to shift gears a little bit and get you folks to talk a little bit more. We have a pretty good understanding of, well, as much as we can in the 10 minutes that you've led us through your lives. We have some understanding of where you were and the impacts of your mental health journey. We'd like to kind of move that forward a little bit now into your transition back to work. Some of you have touched on that already, but that's a real key element. And Diana, you finished off very, very nicely, very eloquently about how you were able to transition and the experience you had. But I'd like to dig into that a little bit more, because I think that's a real area of concern for a lot of people going through mental health situations and crises. Why? How do they do that transition? How do they feel? How do they want people to talk to them? How do they want people to be around them and provide support if they need it or not? So I'd like to get into that a little bit more. And I would like to start with Adam this time, just to talk about your journey back to work.
Yeah, so just touching off of what you said earlier, for me, these experiences are cathartic, right? And I think that I'm motivated at my core by giving back and helping people in crisis. I also feel it very rewarding. And so I welcome these opportunities. And again, thank you to Sangeeta. I think that when I reflect on my return to work, the thing that I need to make abundantly clear is that my experience isn't yours, and vice versa. And for me, I consider what I would have wanted, right? And one of the things is for my leader or a leader at the time to listen, to understand, rather than to respond. Oftentimes we have these preconceived notions, or we assume what is right for that person, which really is arrogant, right? And I think that for me, I am career and family centered. And throughout my cancer journey, I needed to relinquish that work center. But it was always something that I was excited to reclaim when I was able to rebound. It was something that I had envisioned. I would spend months in bed ruminating and being bold enough to hope and see that light at the end of the tunnel. And what I craved was to return to some semblance of normal. Another thing that I would have hoped for was self-aware, for someone to be more self-aware and have that introspection, to be able to identify conscious and unconscious biases that played into their assumptions of what was needed and the stigma that they were unintentionally perpetuating. For me, it's very important to understand that recovery is not synonymous with weakness or inadequacy for me, right? And I think that that's really the key. My experience isn't yours, but if you would have taken the time to really peel back that onion and listen, right, then you would have been able to identify that.
That's really interesting. I think, you know, and would you say that that's, you call it arrogance? I would also maybe call it ignorance, that people are unaware that they either need to look at the situation differently or that there's more than one option. And they may be trying to help, but they may not really be providing you the help you need. Would you say that that's?
Yeah, I think that there are both, right? And it's highly circumstantial. There's believing that you know better than the person that's in that situation, right? That I would tie to arrogance. But then there's general unknowing, right? And not knowing what to do. And because of that, shying away from it and not being comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And these are, what, in my opinion, leadership table stakes, right? We need to be more comfortable in broaching these conversations. We don't claim to be medical experts, and I don't think that's our place, right? But lending an ear is something that any of us can do, and it doesn't take positional authority to be able to support that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's right across the board, and it kind of harkens back to the old adage where leaders maybe feel they have to have all the answers on all aspects of their jobs, when in fact, if they don't, that's fine. You know, we'll find out the answer, or we'll work together towards something that's mutually beneficial. But really interesting points of what you're bringing up there, and I think that you know, those are reflective points. And if there are leaders on the call today, those are certainly things that we can think about, take back, and say, "Geez, have I been in that kind of situation, and how have I behaved, and what have I brought to the table, and is there a better way I could have handled things?" So really insightful, Adam. Thank you. I would like to move over to Diana and talk to her a bit about this, because you've touched on it already. You've talked about what an amazing job Evelyn did to help you. Can you expand a bit on that? And can you talk about beyond Evelyn and some of the other supports that you may have received?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I do feel so lucky to have been part of Evelyn's team. I do sometimes think about former organizations where I could probably guarantee I would have not had a very good experience. And I think what has been so important and I hadn't been at Toronto Hydro for a very long time. I think I'd been there for maybe 9 months before my diagnosis. So, but she had the ability to, I guess we had a really good, an open communication, and that was established before, but she knew that there's a human element, there's a work element, and she knew there was a human element, and the human element was more important than the work. And she, you know, she definitely walked the talk. And again, I can't even remember the exact words, but I remember how I felt. I just felt that it was okay to share with her, that she would take care of things. We had some big projects that I was working on, and of course that was on my mind of, gosh, if I go out, what am I going to do? And it just, I'd been, career oriented and had wanted to do a good job. So all those things that kind of go through your head. She just said, don't even worry about that. When you're back and you're healthy, so it was very positive. And I think that's the other thing. So I think just everything she said was genuine. And I felt it. And I would say that it was always the right words and always at the right time. As I was going through the cancer journeys, they're similar, but they're different, and you have different needs throughout the way. And I still struggle with mental. So it used to be chemo brain. I don't know if it's still chemo brain, but it's mental fogginess. But I think she understands that. And then again, I was able to. I no longer report to her, unfortunately. But I would have the ability to just say to her, "This is what I'm feeling." She would help me. She would help me either support me in if there's something that I needed to deliver, or maybe kind of steer me from what I needed to work on to something else. So she would just be so flexible that it was okay, because when I came back, I would agree with the others in that I was definitely not the same person, in a better way. But the parts of me that I did appreciate about myself, like I feel like I was maybe a bit more confident, that was gone. I felt extremely unsure of myself. And so I feel that she was able to help me manage and be successful to build a bit more of that confidence as I came back. And that just was, again, so meaningful. I would say that I certainly have had such a positive experience with her. I would say from outside of her, funnily enough, I'm going to say on the personal side, I did not have that level of support. So I want to say my work family was much more supportive, and very few close friends. Family was not as supportive. So it was quite a difference. And I think it's just the marked difference as you're going through all of this. I had family members who said a lot of the wrong things, which was difficult. And then I had, my work family, which said a lot of the right things. So, yeah, I think just it's you don't know what to say, and that's okay. You don't have to say anything extremely powerful or anything. I think you just whatever you're going to say, and that could be, I don't know what to say right now, but it just has to be genuine. I think you just kind of see through if somebody's going to be ingenuous, and they say, "Oh, let me know if you need something," and they don't really need it. You can tell. So I think the one thing that I would always just kind of relay is just be there. Like Adam said, it's just listening. It's just it could be a text of how you doing. That's all you need. I think you just need to know that somebody in the world out there is caring for you, or cares about you in a time that maybe it's not the best day for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really. Oh, gee, that's such an interesting kind of reverse of what I would think would be the support. You kind of think, well, the workplace is the one that's going to put the pressure on you to come back and push you into uncomfortable areas and maybe not provide the support. And then the family and friends would be the real support system. But in your case, it's kind of the opposite, which is interesting to see. And I guess, the big thing I pull out of what you're saying is the word trust. And to understand, is there a trust already there? And if there is, then the people are, what they say they're going to do. And if they say, take your time, they mean it, take your time to come back, take your time to get up to speed and whatever it takes. And it sounds like you got that from work. And I just would like to ask you really quickly, do you think that helped in your healing? Do you think that relieved the stress that people feel when they come back to work? And did that help in your healing, maybe speed it up or just make things feel better psychologically, and it could maybe obviously help you physiologically as well?
I can say for me, absolutely. And I think because if I had to think about, so being off and then going back to work, can be stressful enough. And then if I had to go back to what I was doing before, having been away for almost a year, I think would have been extremely overwhelming. And I would say my experience was, Evelyn said, we've got this. When you come back, you let me know what you think you can handle, and then we'll get there. And I would say I look forward to going back. I was very hesitant. I was quite nervous about being able to deliver. And I think if I had had somebody who had said, okay, when you come back, you're going to do exactly what you were doing before, I don't know how I would have been able to handle that. If I'm being, I think I was able, and I really truly was. I was nervous again. Was I going to be able to physically do it? Mentally, again, I was dealing with this chemo brain and mental fog. And if I had to go back to what I was doing before, I don't know how I would have been able to handle it.
Well, that's really interesting. And I think, if you've got an employer that is willing to work with you at that level, it just makes your whole recovery that much easier, and it makes you want to come back to that employer, which is a little different path than what Melissa did. And so I wanted to kind of dovetail into that a little bit if we can. Thank you so much for that, Diana, because I think, from a leadership perspective, that's what we need to understand. We need to understand that people are coming back and they're different. They're different in a lot of good ways, but they're different from what they went through. And so there may be time needed to bring them back in and find out what they are going to be best at now. And there could be a whole new realm of work that they would be excellent at that maybe was different from what they were doing before. Maybe they don't want to continue doing that. There's all kinds of those things. So I think discussion and communication is critical to back and forth and creating that trusting environment with your employer and your employee. So really interesting story. Thank you for that. So this does dovetail nicely into you, Melissa, and your journey. So you decided to kind of have a fresh start at a new company. So take us a little bit through that path you took and your decision making and how it's impacted you.
So I think, my mindset at the time, and for any of the viewers out there that has ever gone through EMDR therapy or post-traumatic stress
Sorry,
disorder.
could you say that again? What is it?
EMDR. It's eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So essentially, it's a form of therapy that involves it's half hypnosis and reprocessing traumatic events throughout your life to look at that traumatic event in a different way. Okay. And that's how it worked for me. So what that does is it allows you to look back at memories and, okay, what was a positive thing that happened during that memory, right? And you're kind of in this hypnosis state as you're going through that journey. And it's not just about the events that may have triggered PTSD. You actually go back right from infancy, which was a phenomenal journey. Yes, Surendra, thank you. Yes. So going through that journey, it really changed the way that I thought. It changed the way that I felt about myself. And what came with that is a different level of confidence, but also reservation and wanting to be a little bit more private about some of my stories that perhaps I was a little bit more outwardly sharing in the past. So when I was making the decision to change careers and change jobs, which again, I mentioned earlier, that's not an easy decision to make when you have spent 15 years growing up in an industry, growing up in a company, I should say, not just the industry, but growing up in a company where I was happy. I loved the people that I worked with, and I enjoyed having that work family type of feel. And they weren't just folks that I went to work with, they were also people that I hung out with in my personal life. So there was a lot of a different connection there. But in a way, I look back and I was lucky because I was on maternity leave when I kind of transitioned into the mental health diagnosis and into more of short-term disability, long-term disability. So there was never that I have to go and talk to my manager about the situation. I really actually didn't have any communication with my manager at all, other than dealing with health services, right? When you're transitioning into a different type of leave. So it wasn't with my manager. It was just more of, I didn't want to go back and have to explain why I had an extended leave, why I was in a different situation, and why I was feeling different about who I was and what I could do in my job. So starting fresh for me wasn't about avoidance or, wanting to cut ties in that situation. It was really about, how do I start fresh new without having to explain myself? And that was so important in the moment. And it didn't last long, because you start to come back out of your shell. You are who you are at the core. But what was different was the way that I shared it. I shared it with intent, and I shared it with wanting to make a difference, because Sangeeta said it at the beginning of when we kicked off this webinar. If I can make a difference in one person's lives by making them feel comfortable, or being a shoulder that they can reach out to say, hey, wow, I didn't realize that somebody has gone through that, or that I can do that myself. If I'm able to make that impact with one person, then that to me is the reason why I had to go through a hard time. That gives me the purpose, right? So making sure that I am vocal, that I share my journey. I don't impose advice. That's not my space. I don't think it's, I think it's important to stay neutral, but I do share what's worked for me, so that people can grab bits and bytes of that experience and make it their own advice. And I do the same thing for first-time moms, by the way. The one thing I tell anybody, if they're expecting any children in the near future, the one piece of advice is, don't take any advice from anybody, right? Because who am I? Who am I to tell you how to raise your children? Who am I to tell you how to overcome your mental health challenges, and whether or not it's a symptomatic anxiety or depression, or whether or not it's a full diagnosis, right? Which are very different. That's not my job. My job for me is to share my journey, is to share what's worked, and how I overcame, so that others can feel comfortable and build a little bit of confidence in sharing theirs. Gives me that purpose.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate you sharing your story with us here today. It's very inspiring, all of you. Very inspiring stories that you have, and it's the thing that I think about. I'm self-employed, so I don't really have the situation to go back to an office with a whole bunch of people around, and my bosses, and then all the people that they want to know what's going on and tell us what's how you feeling, and I can understand how that can in and of itself cause people to feel stress, and you want to just sometimes maybe start new. And I think you've made that decision, and it's worked out very, very well for you. So kudos to you. Sangeeta, any comments on some of the discussion that we've had so far? Oh, you're on mute.
Oops, sorry.
2020 saying, here we are, 2023, still saying you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Yeah,
we had
question.
to do it at least once.
Yeah. What role has personal interest or hobbies played in your mental health through your own health challenges? And how did you prioritize them in your daily life?
Oh, okay. So we have a question. So hobbies and different activities to kind of, okay. Diana, do you want to touch on that one?
Well, I got a dog in 2019.
Oh, you got a COVID dog.
Just before.
Just before.
I want to say probably my hobby and then some. That's a good question. I don't know if I have a hobby, so I definitely have a dog, and that, yeah, so that's probably my hobby. I do recognize though, and actually just recently have been talking about when I was younger, I would do crafts. I used to like to sew, and I was terrible at knitting, but I thought, I haven't done that in a long time, and maybe I need to go back and figure out how do I integrate that a bit more into my life. So it's a good question. I'm still thinking. I'm working on that one.
Okay, sounds great. Adam, what did you pick up anything new along the way?
Yeah, so I started a blog that kind of details my cancer journey from diagnosis to my early stage recovery, and I found that to be so cathartic. And I can remember being in that hospital room with my tray over my bed, acknowledging that I was going to be in isolation for weeks on end, right? Where I couldn't leave the room. And that was an escape for me to be able to talk about my feelings and connect with the outside world. I will say though that the physical is tied very heavily to your mental state, and until I could get one under control, the other was also in a bad place. So it took me years and years to understand that. And when, I started to make positive changes that affected my overall physical well-being, the mental also followed, and then vice versa, right? So I think it's maintaining that balanced approach between the two, where I make a very concerted effort to focus on both. Okay.
Yeah, that's so key. I'm glad you brought that up. So I think you'd mentioned to me earlier that you used to do a lot of physical activity. And if you come from that background and you can't do that any longer, it's a very challenging situation to be in, and it really does affect you mentally. And certainly you've developed some very strong mental attributes to compensate for that as you're going through the process. And hopefully you're getting back into things that you enjoy. And I think that's the other piece of it.
Jeff, can I
Yeah.
jump in and ask a question from Nigel? So Nigel has a great question here. What are some key things you can look out for in your employees or family members that might indicate they're in need of support?
Okay.
Such an important question.
Melissa,
That's a really good question. So I think, I talk a lot about psychological safety, and really what that does is, what psychological safety means is creating an environment free of judgment, and building trust. And that's both in your families and also in the workplace. And if you've created that environment within your team where you've demonstrated your vulnerability, where you've built that trust, I think then you start to really know your people. And knowing your people is the first step in being able to identify when there's a shift in their behavior. Changes in behavior, notice those things, ask the question, hey, I'm noticing that you're a little bit off today. How is it that I can make your day better? Or is there something that you want to talk about? The answer may be no. But as that person walks away, they're like, wow, okay, they're noticing, right? So, and that in itself starts to build that trust and starts to build a safety net, if I could say. And if it starts to be a trend, that's where you really want to sit down and say, look, this has been going on for a little bit now. I've noticed that you're not yourself. You're not your usual self. You don't have to share it with me. And this is from an employer perspective, perhaps more so. You don't have to share it with me, what the details are, but I just wanted to let you know, here are some resources where you can go that are unbiased, right? You don't have to worry about it. And that's the other part of creating that mental healthy workplace is making sure that you know your resources and know when to draw that line, right? Because you have to be the employer at the same time that you want to make sure that you're building that personal connection. So that's so critically important. And that would be the key things that I would recommend.
Yeah, no, great advice. Really good. And we hear that word trust come up again, right? And that's
important.
Right. And that's culture, and that's supported right from the leadership on down through every level within the organization. Sangeeta, is there?
Do we have time for one more question, Jeff?
I think we'll do one more, and then
so this is
we'll
the last question then.
We'll do a wrap up. Okay.
Yeah, and so I'll ask this question. So from Surinder, what role do contemporary leaders play in fostering a supportive and mentally healthy work environment?
Okay, Adam, what would you say?
So she explicitly says contemporary leaders, but I would just broaden the scope to say leaders overall, right? In order to foster that culture, I think that inclusivity needs to kind of be at the forefront, right? And that's in acknowledging that diversity is really the key to workplaces that that succeed and that are complementary to one another, but that also means that you can't employ one size fits all approaches, right? And it really underscores the fact that people are different. I wanted to call out that this time of year, you know, though it's exciting for many of us, it also incites a high degree of fear and loneliness and perhaps even despair for people that don't have the same support networks, right? So being in tune with your people and knowing what their events are and what they're celebrating and being able to pick up on those changes, I think, is what is key to fostering that culture.
Really good point. I'm glad you brought that up because we are one of the most diverse, culturally diverse, at least in Toronto, one of the most culturally diverse cities in the world, and certainly in Canada. So we do need to keep that in mind as leaders. And I think that's extremely important. Diana, did you have any thoughts on that?
I think what Adam said is absolutely right. I think the vulnerability part is maybe the only thing that I will add on. It's okay to be vulnerable, and you know, I think if you as a leader throughout, you know, it's not going to happen overnight. It's building that relationship, it's building that trust throughout, and if you can share anything that you're vulnerable, I think somebody will reciprocate in turn. And you know, I think people unfortunately are just afraid to say, and especially if you're in a leadership position, you kind of don't want to admit that you don't have it together, or you're not as strong as maybe you think everybody thinks you are. Or so I think that if we as leaders can just say it's okay, and you know, we are in this together, we really are, that helps to maybe bring people out from something they may not have wanted to share previously.
That's a really, really good point. And being vulnerable, being open, being authentic, and creating that level of trust. I think we can kind of encapsulate everything that everyone has just said here. That's a really, really strong message to take forward as leaders. So thank you all for responding to that. Well, we are getting close to the end of our session, Sangeeta, and
Yes.
I think we have time. Maybe if we can allot 60 seconds to each of our panel members to just give maybe one takeaway that you would like to give the audience here today that they can take back, either personally or something that they can use on their on the work side of their lives, if they're leaders or if they're supporting people, or even just day to day. What would you say is kind of the key takeaway point? And Diana, I will start with you.
I think my key takeaway is you don't always have to know the answer or the exact words to say. I mean, words are very powerful, but I think the sentiment and the meaning behind those words are the most important. And it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay not to be okay. And the journey is tough, but I think if you can have the proper support, I think you can pretty much get through most adversities in life.
And to seek out that support, right?
To seek, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe thing to add is, if that just based on a personal experience, if the first person that you reach out to doesn't help you, then find somebody else, because maybe it's just not a good fit. So maybe that's the only other thing that I might add.
Yeah, good, really good point. Thank you for that. Melissa, what would you leave the audience with?
I think looking at it from a leader perspective, right, and in the workplace, that, you know, folks don't wake up and choose that it's going to be a difficult day.
Yeah.
So knowing that we, though, can choose kindness, and we can choose to ask questions instead of provide judgment, is so critically important. And whether you're talking about peers or in the workplace, or even, you know, in your personal lives, I think that's what I would encourage us to do. Is tomorrow, you know, I have a sticky note on my mirror, and I had to live with sticky notes on my mirrors as gentle reminders for quite some time. But you get to choose kindness, and you get to choose to ask those questions, and remove judgment. And that to me is the most important thing for humanity, and not just as a leader, but one of the things that I really strive to do. And yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, kindness, compassion. I think they're two very underrated elements.
Authentic is so critical to go with that, though, right? You have to be genuine and you have to be authentic when choosing that kindness.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you can't turn it on and off. Yeah, yeah. Great. Thank you very much. And Adam, last but not least, what would you like to impart to our audience here today?
I think that for leaders that are listening to this, I want them to walk away knowing that we are entrusted with a high degree of influence that can work to the advantage or detriment of our followers. And a quote that I'm reminded of is by Stephen Covey. Our job as leaders is to communicate a person's worth and potential so clearly that they begin to see it in themselves and manifest it. And I've actually seen it play out on both sides of the spectrum. Right? So don't discount the influence that you have as a leader. Own it, right? And make sure that it's working to the advantage of your people.
That's a great message, a great quote, and it works both ways. I like that message. That's very powerful. Well, folks, that pretty much takes us close to the end of our session. I first of all just want to thank our panel members for, again, donating their time. These stories we hear are incredible. These are just 3 people on this call. All of you out there, you have your own stories, and so I think it's a great opportunity to reflect on your stories as well as hear what these folks have had to say. And hopefully we've learned something from their stories and their journeys. And we're all still on the journey. This journey never ends, but it gets better, and we learn and we become stronger. So again, thank you to Melissa, to Adam, to Diana, and also Sangeeta. I mean, without her, these things don't exist. So I would like to pass it over to her and for some final words.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Adam, Diana, Melissa, for opening up your hearts. And I just want to give a message to everybody who's seeing this live or the recording after, that if you have a short story that you would like to share and insights that you've gained, feel free to reach out to me. We're going to be doing these sessions regularly. In January, we're going to do a session from practitioners who can bring in policies and impact work culture. That's going to happen late in January. So this is for everyone. I applaud all of you, and Jeff, thank you for creating that environment to make our panelists feel safe. You know, GTACC, we offer, oh, and by the way, these sessions are for anyone, any part of the world, any industry. This is human to human. We're just here to serve. So if you want to know more about GTACC and be in the know, just go to our GTACC.ca, and it's free to join right now. So just click join. And if you're interested in our Women in Leadership event in March of 2024, we still have in-person and virtual tickets left. Not too many, but there are left. And you can go to our website to get the tickets as well. But just, I wish all of you, as we head into the holiday season, if you are struggling, please know that you matter and that to seek out help. And if you recognize, I think Nigel had the question, if you see something that's off in someone, you know, we can all pause and ask and let people know that they care. So thank you, everyone. Have a safe, happy, and joyful holiday season.
One other thing, Sangeeta, we do have that one page.
Oh yes,
document.
Yes. Sorry, there's a one-pager takeaways that the team has put together, and Melissa formatted it and put all the great nuggets together in one and made it amazing. They'll go out tomorrow with the recording, so you can have all that so that it's in your back pocket, and you can use it as a tool to empower you to serve your family members and your team members and yourself. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.